Yes, so it's 11 o'clock, so welcome to this digital event with CYXO. My name is Henrik Ekman, and I'm equity analyst here at HC Andersen Capital. And with me today, I have CEO Tara Heitner from CYXO. Before we begin, as always, the format is that the company representative will do the presentations and we'll take questions afterwards. So for the audience, feel free to forward your questions in the chat room, and I will do my best to forward them to Tara. So with that, Tara, a very warm welcome to you. This is our first digital event with you, so we're looking forward to get a thorough and in-depth introduction to the company and to the share to better understand your company. So with that, Tara, take it away.
Thank you for the introduction, Henrik. It's really a pleasure to be here at HC Andersen Capital. Autoimmune disease, including rheumatoid arthritis, which is the focus of our company right now. These are chronic, lifelong, debilitating diseases, and right now they're increasing in incidence. They impact over 20 million patients worldwide, and with that represent an extreme burden to patients and healthcare systems. For rheumatoid arthritis, or RA, there are 40% of patients not responding to first-line treatments, and actually 50% of patients do not achieve remission, which is ultimately the goal of rheumatologists. So my name is Tara Heitner, and I'm CEO of Cyxone. We are an emerging biotech company located in Sweden, and we're listed on the First North Growth Market in Stockholm. We're developing transformative therapies for autoimmune disease to address these gaps in treatment. So autoimmune disease represents a paradox for patients because the very system that is meant to protect the body against diseases like infections and cancer, instead the immune system attacks the healthy cells and tissue. And you can't simply shut down the immune system in these cases, because then you would actually be more open to diseases like infections and cancer. So you have to be clever in these cases and identify the fundamental biology and the part of the immune system that's responsible for the disease, and if possible, address that isolated part. So Cyxone's approach is to address the disease in a new way with new drugs, with new modes of action, through understanding the fundamental biology of the disease. We aim to deliver therapeutics with completely new modes of action that are easy to administer, easy to take, and which have favorable safety and tolerability profiles so that they're compatible with chronic diseases that last a lifetime and with a high quality of life. Today, we're developing two drugs in two different therapeutic areas. Rabeximod for rheumatoid arthritis, or RA, which is a disease where the immune system attacks the healthy tissues of the joints. And we're developing T20K for multiple sclerosis, or MS, which is a disease where the immune system attacks the nervous system. We are in a clinical stage company, and right now we are ramping up towards a very exciting trial for Rabeximod and rheumatoid arthritis, a phase 2b trial, which is one of the major inflection points for a company in our business, and this is our current focus. We also have, of course, T20K, which is an earlier stage program, but we've made a lot of progress in the last year, both with the T20K in terms of identifying a new administration form and showing really good efficacy with a combination with a kappa opioid receptor agonist, which can treat even a wider range of multiple sclerosis patients and possibly even more severe patients. But for today's presentation, I'm going to focus on our lead program for Rabeximod in rheumatoid arthritis. Our long-term vision is, of course, to increase the asset value by expanding indications. Both of T20K and Rabeximod have modes of action that are relevant across autoimmune diseases and neuroinflammation. And we will also increase our portfolio in the future by in-licensing additional projects. All of this is possible because we have in place a management team with a strong and established record within pharma, clinical and business development, as well as finance. And we have a strong drug development team supporting us as well. We work with a range of scientific advisors, both on the medical side with therapeutic area expertise, but also, as I said, building on the fundamental understanding of the biology. We have several collaborations with world-class institutions. We have working closely with Konstantino Pitsalis from the London School of Medicine, with Richard Hamdahl from Karolinska University in Sweden, and with Professor Christian Gruber from the Medical University of Vienna. Now about RA. One advantage of rheumatoid arthritis is that today there is very good diagnosis of patients and there's a high treatment rate, so there are many options for patients. However, unfortunately, once diagnosed, patients enter into a very complex treatment labyrinth where they are first treated with first-line treatments. And when these fail, which they often do in 40% of patients, they are cycled through either triple treatments or biologicals, which are injections. For biologicals, only 30% of patients respond well to any given biological. And this probably is why there are so many on the market. As rheumatologists cycle through these biologicals, it becomes a very complex and cumbersome treatment course escalation. And in the end, unfortunately, only 50% of patients actually achieve remission. So there is a need for novel therapies for rheumatoid arthritis. And what properties do these new therapies need? Well, they have to address a chronic disease, a lifelong disease where patients need to be treated for decades. Otherwise, they will get joint deformity and bone erosion. We need therapies that are compatible with lifelong treatment progression, and we need to alleviate symptoms with the treat to target algorithm, getting patients to remain in remission for a long time. This is an area where rheumatologists follow strict guidelines for treatment, and therefore, if you show that your drug is fitting into these guidelines and offering relief for patients, there will be reimbursement by insurers. And because this is a disease which is well diagnosed and has a high treatment rate, there's a good reimbursement setting for a new drug coming onto the market if it's approved. Finally, again, there are many non-responders in this market, making it very attractive for a new drug with a completely novel mode of action to come in. So in summary, I hope I've convinced you there is a very strong demand in rheumatoid arthritis for new oral drug therapies. Furthermore, recently, JAK inhibitors, which was a class favored by rheumatologists as an oral treatment that could be used before biologicals, has recently come under criticism for side effects, serious side effects. And the FDA has slapped some very strict warnings, black box warnings, on the use of these in several autoimmune diseases. So very likely they will be relegated to third, fourth line treatments after biologics. This points to the high need for alternative oral therapies. As you can see, the market is dominated by biologicals, which are injections. And the only other oral therapeutics that are dominating are, of course, first-line treatments like methotrexate and JAK inhibitors. And these come with some unfavorable safety and tolerability issues. So Rabeximod is a new potential first-in-class drug candidate, which has a completely new mode of action, but it's still administered orally. It has already been shown to have clinical efficacy in a strong phase 2A study in methotrexate non-responding patients, and a favorable safety profile, safety and tolerability profile in phase 1 and phase 2A studies. Our KOLs, including Professor Pitzelis, have stated that its mode of action and the oral availability make Rabeximod an ideal candidate for rheumatoid arthritis patients. So Rabeximod, as I mentioned, has a completely new mode of action. There's no other drug on the market with this mode of action or on the pipeline. It addresses a fundamental biology of disease, and by suppressing one of the main cell types responsible for the damage to the joint in rheumatoid arthritis, the inflammatory macrophages, it suppresses the development of this cell type, and it suppresses the cytokines expressed by the macrophage, which go on to recruit even more immune cells that can damage the joint. So this represents a completely new tool that rheumatologists will have in their toolbox to offer to patients who don't respond to current standards of treatment. Simply to show you the actual clinical study results from the phase 2A study, you can see that at 8 weeks, you already see improvements over placebo. At 12 weeks, you see increased improvements over placebo. Between 12 and 16 weeks, there's no treatment. This is a follow-up period. But this is what we find very interesting, this durability that we see where you get an increase of signal over time and you see statistical significance in the improvement at 16 weeks. We believe this is just the tip of the iceberg, and this will likely increase, making this a very optimal treatment for a chronic disease, a long-term treatment where you need to see efficacy over years and possibly decades. So our vision for Rabeximod is that we will develop it as a potential second-line DMARD, disease-modifying anti-rheumatic drug, which can be used for methotrexate non-responders and non-responders to first-line treatments as a way to delay the need for serious treatment course escalation to biologicals or even JAK inhibitors, and offer to patients now a new, simple oral drug they can take to maintain their disease in remission. This is a great commercial opportunity, for even though we are targeting a niche of patients, it represents over $1 billion in peak sales. If you assume that the market is currently about 28 billion, this represents 20 million patients. If we look at the patients in our target markets, which is US and Europe, this is over 3.5 million patients. 1 million of these are non-responding to current standard of care. And if we take a conservative estimate of 15% market penetration at peak and a cost of $10,000 per year, we get to this potential blockbuster potential. So a very interesting commercial proposition. We're very excited because we're in the process of startup activities for an interesting phase 2B trial in rheumatoid arthritis. We have a clear development path towards the start of the trial and completion of the trial. We are currently getting ready for regulatory submissions in Eastern Europe. Of course, we had a bit of a hiccup due to the terrible situation in Ukraine and Russia, but we have overcome that, and we're on our way towards regulatory submissions and patient enrollment this year. With the current plans, if we continue, we would have top-line results towards the end of 2023 or early 2024. Our business model is to partner with strategic partners in order to bring in the expertise for later stage development, market authorization, and commercialization. And we have a number of discussions ongoing with partners interested in early stage partnerships, and also pharma companies that are interested in partnering after a phase 2B readout. But all this signifies that there is a large market interest if we have a new drug that shows efficacy in our target patient population. So finally, why invest in Cyxone? Well, for patients, we're providing, as I mentioned, a drug with a completely novel mode of action that's not represented by any other drug on the market or in the pipeline. We have already shown a favorable safety and tolerability profile, and we'll try to further this with our upcoming clinical studies. This is an oral administered drug, which can be taken as a single daily dose, And this is something patients would much prefer compared to injections or hospitalization. For our shareholders, we're addressing large markets with large underserved patient segments where there is an interest for licensing and partnerships from the pharma community. And we're already in many ongoing interesting discussions. We have a strong patent strategy as well going forward, protecting Rabeximod with a number of patents. We filed 5 new patents in the last 2 years, protecting it until 2041 and beyond. And finally, we have a number of near and long-term inflection points to look forward to. So with that, I hope that I've spiked your interest in Cyxone, and I look forward to taking your questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Tara. Very interesting.
Okay.
And first of all, just to get started on sort of a higher level discussion, yesterday you updated the company's strategic priorities. So could you elaborate on the timing and the motivation for that? Because you actually have plenty of cash and good data for T20K for multiple sclerosis. So why that refocus and
well, we want to make sure that we have all the resources focused on RA so that we can execute the trial in as short a time as possible and finalize it in as short a time as possible, because I think it's of interest to shareholders to see the results sooner rather than later. And we can do that by focusing on the Rabeximod and RA trial. We have made a lot of progress in T20K in the last year preclinically, and it's in a very good situation. We started a collaboration with one of Europe's leading peptide manufacturers and CMC activities this year, which is going very well. So while it's on a low burner, we still have a lot of activities that started last year that we will complete, and so hopefully we'll be able to in the future push this program forward as well.
Okay, so it has to be taken literally that you put the additional studies on hold, but you are able to at any future point to restart the program if possible.
Yes, we look for we're looking at grants, and we have a number of activities that are still ongoing. So while we will generate data with the current activities, and hopefully these will also spark interest in the program.
Okay, so from just to finish off on that, so from a financial point of view, what's sort of the benefit or the change in terms of so I guess the putting additional studies on hold will make the current cash position last longer. Do you have any sort of idea as to, roughly speaking, much longer your current cash position will last now that you only focus on Rabeximod?
Well, our idea is also to accelerate things. So right now our cash position will carry us into the first quarter of 2023. And depending on how fast we run the trial and recruit patients, that can shift. But it's actually an advantage for us and for our investors to recruit as fast as possible, and and we will try to do that. It's not 100% in our control, but we're working with one of the world's leading CROs, which has many capabilities and sites around Eastern Europe. So we will be able to. We don't have any risk of not completing this trial.
Okay. If we go back to you had this very interesting slide about the market potential of Rabeximod, and that's just for the RR indication. But yeah, there it is. Thank you. So it's just to get a better idea as to how you come up with these different numbers in terms of market shares,
sure.
assume pricing levels, because I guess there is, as you state yourselves, that there are many competing therapies and products out there. So just to get.
Yes, everything will depend, of course, on the efficacy shown in phase 3. But these are several assumptions are made. The 28 billion is from a market report, so that's just an estimate of what it was in 2020, and it's approximately 20 million patients worldwide, which you can find online in literature. When we talk about the inadequate responders, we're being very conservative there, because the 40% are not responding to methotrexate, but there's another 25% that respond but don't tolerate it. They have terrible gastrointestinal side effects and what they call methotrexate coma. So oftentimes many patients don't comply with their treatment because the side effects are so unbearable. And I haven't brought it into these calculations, but eventually, not in our phase 2b study, but in the phase 3 study, it is very likely that TNF-alpha non-responders will also be included. But this is a very conservative estimate for only the RA market. As I mentioned, we will also seek to expand into other indications. We do already have preclinical data showing that Rabeximod is very effective in neuroinflammation disorders such as multiple sclerosis and traumatic brain injury. So once we establish the Rabeximod in RA trial, we will seek to develop it in multiple indications, as a multi-indication pharma deal is much more lucrative, and it also helps to de-risk it for our shareholders.
Mm-hmm. And in terms of the assumed pricing level, I guess you had a slide where you sort of briefly talked about the reimbursement structure. It's just to get a better sense of where these numbers come from.
So the reimbursement for JAK inhibitors in the US is $25,000 per year, approximately. And we are going to be aiming for the US and the European market, and probably the global market. So I took an average and very conservative at $10,000 per year.
Good. Generally, you've been very explicit about the potential of doing partnerships, and I guess that you would consider yourself as a developing company and will not take the products to the market yourselves. Can you elaborate on how you think of all these partner strategy options and how we should think of that?
That's a good question. If you make a deal early on, if you make a deal before the readout of the phase 2b, you give up some of the value of the deal, but it's a trade-off, right? So ideally, we would be able to run everything and on our own and wait until the phase 2b readout, make a deal. That would be the greatest value, especially if it's a multi-indication deal. However, I think that the stage of the company we are now, many of our shareholders and partners are looking to see market validation, and so an early deal is powerful for that market validation. We have a number of discussions ongoing, and in order to retain the value of a larger deal after phase 2b readout, we're looking at smaller regional deals in regions outside of the US and Europe. And there's a number of those discussions that are ongoing.
Mm-hmm. Sounds interesting. If we go back to the slide regarding the data readouts, you mentioned this that after 16 weeks you had these very promising results, and you touched upon that there could be readouts for longer periods of time that could prove even more.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, there's two parameters you look at when you're looking at an RA drug. One is onset of action. When do the patients actually feel relief? And obviously, the earlier you feel relief, the better. However, that relief also has to last for decades. And if you have a drug that has an early onset of action, but you can't take it for decades, it's not as interesting. Our drug maybe has a slightly later mode of action, but it looks like we're just seeing the beginning of its efficacy. And we are going to explore in our phase 2b trial that a longer endpoint, 16 weeks, as well as follow-up to 24 weeks. And with this, we'll be able to explore this hypothesis that likely if we continue treatment out to longer, we will see an increase in the signal and even more and greater efficacy. And this is where the value is, because patients need to stay on these treatments for so long, that we think that there will be uptake in the market, because it's oral, it's safe, and it will hopefully show efficacy over a long period of time.
Yeah. And in terms of dosing, does this chart on the left-hand side represent that you have sort of narrowed the upcoming studies to
yes,
in terms of dosing to the 15 milligrams, or what should we expect?
Yeah, that's exactly right. This was a very robust phase 2a study. It was run in 225 patients, so a large number of moderate to severe RA patients. They were actually quite severe. If we look at the actual individual patient charts, they had very high average CRP levels. And so the fact that we see improvements in this patient group is quite impressive from that side. The 15 milligram dose is chosen as a dose for the phase 2b trial because it has the best efficacy and also the best safety profile going forward. But we also saw at 16 weeks statistical significance, not just in the primary endpoint, but in 7 other secondary endpoints. So it's the cumulative data that gives us the confidence to move forward and shows that we have adequately de-risk this asset for a phase 2b study.
You mentioned many times that the current competitive landscape consists of other treatments, but they are all treatments. There's no cure for this. But as far as I understand, there are of course development of products from in earlier stages.
Yes, there are.
Actually cure of the disease. What's your thoughts on that?
I'm not aware of any cure for rheumatoid arthritis. It's quite complex in terms of the etiology. It's a combination of genetic factors and environmental factors that cause the disease, and I don't know that it's been narrowed down. There are compounds in development for rheumatoid arthritis that are BTK inhibitors, as well as IRAK4 inhibitors and other compounds that with other modes of action that address immune cells such as macrophages. And you know, it remains to be seen which one will actually be effective. We have a good data set which already supports moving forward. And we believe that the safety profile warrants it. And also we have a strong patent protection that makes it a good commercial opportunity. So we're very excited about this, but it's also the fact that the mode of action makes Rabeximod relevant, not just in rheumatoid arthritis, but beyond into other autoimmune and neuroinflammatory disorders. And this is where our partners really see the value. So once we establish this trial, it is really exciting to think about going into other autoimmune indications, because having an oral drug that has a good safety profile that you can take very easily is so attractive for many autoimmune diseases and neuroinflammation. We'll say more about that later once we get more data on that.
I'm sure that's very interesting to follow as you explore these opportunities. And one of the considerations is, of course, that you have a broad-based staff of scientific advisors, and as you already mentioned. But you did unfortunately have to your CMO departed a couple of months ago. Is there any update as recruitment of a new one, or have you reorganized your scientific approach internally in that regard, or what should we expect?
Yeah, well, luckily we have a great team of medical advisors. So as you saw, Martin Kron has been with the company for a while, and he's an MD who has worked in developing many of the biologicals that are on the market. And we also work with now Jürgen Ries, who's a neurologist, but he supports us also for the RA trial heavily, and the MS. And of course, Constantino Pitsalis is an MD who has a lot of insight into all the different drugs and their ability to protect the joint in RA. And that's where he really saw the value for Rabeximod, the fact that the mode of action could really have an impact on protecting rheumatoid arthritis patients from joint damage. And so in his mind, a drug like Rabeximod should actually be given earlier, as early as possible. He is a specialist looking at joint biopsies and studying immune cells and their role in progression of the disease, where the macrophage is shown to have a very important role. So we are developing a drug that directly impacts one of the main cell types that causes the damage and the pain that patients experience.
Yes. Okay, Tara, time is running. So just a last question. You had this slide about the upcoming milestones. So just what is the next milestone that the investors should look at and expect from you?
Well, I'm really hoping we will be able to do regulatory submissions before summer and get regulatory approvals and ethical approvals during the late summer, so that we will be able to start patient enrollment after that. And I think that's super exciting.
Okay, thank you. We will be looking forward to hearing more about that. So with that, a very warm thank you to Tara Heitner, CEO of CYXO, who's presented this today. And as always, we will upload the presentation on our various platforms, so people can watch them there if they didn't participate now. So with that, thank you very much, Tara, and
thank you very much, Henrik.
Thank you. Bye bye.
It's been a pleasure.